I'm going to rank each Premier League club's transfer window based on their signings and sales, taking into consideration their budget, the size of the club, and the value on their incomings and outgoings, and then putting them into a tier list from best to worst. Let's get into it. Starting off with Bournemouth, who of course have had a lot of big sales like Sabarni, Otara, Kerkez, and Huijsen. But the signings haven't been as big as the sales, unfortunately. I mean, the signings are a bit of a gamble, every single one of them. Diakite can be a good player, so can Adli and Doak, Petrovic, of course, but none of them are really proven at the top level, so we can't really say how good it will be. But a plus, however, for Bournemouth is the fact that they managed to keep their manager, Iraola, who was rumored to get a move to a bigger club. So, all in all, we're gonna go ahead and put Bournemouth into the decent category. Moving on to one of the favourites to win the league this season. Of course, it's Arsenal who managed to acquire their star striker in Victor Gyökeres. He has had a bit of a slow start, but we all know the quality and the capability of scoring goals that he has. Other than him, of course, they signed two really good midfielders, Ebris Essi and Martin Supamendi, who will complement Odegaard and the other guys really well, I think. A bit of a minus on Unibaneke, who I think they got a bit robbed on for 55 million from Chelsea, but otherwise really solid outgoings as well. Moving on a lot of deadwood here and sending a few young players out on loan. So really solid window from Arsenal. I'm gonna put him straight in the really good category. Next up, we have Aston Villa, who haven't done as well as Arsenal, obviously. They managed to bring in Harvey Elliott while offloading Jacob Ramsey for a similar price. That can be a good move, in my opinion. Harvey Elliott has a lot of talent, but he's not close to being the finished article. Otherwise, bringing in Jadon Sancho and Victor Nilsson Lindelof, two players who couldn't even get off the bench for Manchester United, and we all know how bad Man United were last season. So, and other than that, I mean, Gosson is a good player, but we don't know how he will fare in the Premier League. A lot of outgoings, actually, not that many impressive signings at all. And I'm gonna have to be brutal here and slot Aston Villa right into the really bad category. Moving over to London, we have Brentford, who, like Bournemouth, have managed to do really well with their sales. Obviously, selling Ryan Mbeumo and Wissa for big money. Bringing in Otara is a good move. He has a lot of capability, a lot of potential, should I say. But other than him, I mean, a lot of outgoings as well. No real standout signings except for him, if we're going to be honest. Not too good for Brentford here, and I'm going to put them into the poor category. Moving on to Brentford's main rival, we have Brighton, who of course lost their best player in Joao Pedro, heading to Chelsea for a big chunk of money there, also losing a few key players like Estupinan and Adingra. But they spent that money on a lot of younger players who have a lot of talent, but it's of course a big gamble when you do that, but Brighton often do, and it seems to work out more often than not. But I would have liked to see a bit more experience coming into this Brighton side this season. So I'm gonna go ahead and put Brighton in the mid category. Moving on, we have our first newly promoted side. Of course, it's Burnley, who have actually done pretty well going by their conditions, in my opinion. I mean, they've raised quite a bit of money by sales, obviously, and brought in a few exciting players. So I think they can do quite well this season, at least judging by their transfers. And I'm gonna go ahead and put them into the really good category. Our next club is the most active one this entire summer transfer window. Of course, this is Chelsea. I mean, just take a look at this. It's kind of ridiculous, right? Sure, there are a few good outgoings that have raised a bit of cash here, but can this kind of activity really work? There are a good few players brought in, like Anacho, Gittens, Pedro, obviously, but they won't get the time to gel until the start of the season. And I just think that this is a bit over the top. However, there are a few really good names in there, so I'm going to put Chelsea into decent. Staying in London, we have Crystal Palace, who have had quite the inactive transfer window, actually. Of course, they lost Aburish Esse, a big loss there, but they managed to raise a big chunk of cash for him, spending a bit of it on Jeremy Pino, his upcoming talent, who can prove to be really good. Bit of a gamble, of course, but it can work out. A plus to keep Mateta. Otherwise, like I said, very inactive. I think it can be Kind of a smart move though to keep the squad like it is for Oliver Glasner to work with, but a bit more ambition would have been nice to see, especially going off that FA Cup win. So I'm going to put Palace into mid. Moving on, we have the club with the newest stadium in all of the Premier League. This is Everton, who have managed to get rid of a few of their worst players like Doucouré, Calvert-Lewin, Michael Keane, players who were good previously but just aren't cutting it anymore. But other than that, I mean, a few good signings, Tyler Dibling, of course, Ken Dusper Hall, Tierney Barry. I mean, they are good, but I would like to see a bit more quantity here for Everton. So all in all, I'm going to go ahead and put them into mid. Going back over to London now, we have a really exciting transfer window in some regards. Not because of the activity, it's actually the opposite. We have Fulham, who have been very inactive. They, of course, moved on a lot of players here, but really haven't brought in almost anyone. Chokwesi on loan on like deadline day is interesting. And of course, Kevin here, very interesting signing. And we don't know much about him really. He hasn't proved himself at the top level, but he's an exciting upcoming player. So all in all, a really good window actually, in my opinion, from Fulham here, giving Silva the time to work with what he's got, and I think this can work out. I'm gonna go ahead and put Fulham into decent. The second newly promoted side to the Premier League this season is Leeds. And a bit like Burnley, they have shown a lot of ambition, a lot of activity here, and actually some good activity as well. It's not always positive, but in this case, I think it is. Also taking into consideration the size of the club and the budget for Leeds, I think they've done really, really well actually when we look at the players that they've managed to bring in here. So I'm gonna go ahead and put them into really good. All right, up next, you've been waiting for it. I think every single Premier League fan has been quite jealous of them. Of course, we're gonna scroll down and find Liverpool Football Club. I mean, just look at this. Florian Wirtz, Alexander Isaac, Hugo Ekitike, even raising some really good money here on sales like Nunez and Diaz, Elliott. But the quality and quantity they've managed to bring in here is just incredibly impressive. And as you've probably guessed by now, of course, we're gonna put Liverpool as the winners and therefore the best Premier League side in terms of transfers this summer. Moving on, we have one of Liverpool's biggest rivals, at least in the last few years. Of course, it's Manchester City, have had a very interesting transfer window. Moving on players like Kevin De Bruyne, obviously a big loss, but he was aging a bit. And bringing in a few low key players like Ant Nouri, Ryan Shirky, and so on. And I think that this can be a smart move. I mean, no really big names until this guy, Gianluigi Donnarumma, the best goalkeeper in the world, joined them. All in all, I'm gonna go ahead and put Manchester City into decent. Switching the colors in Manchester from blue to red, we have Manchester United, who have had a very Manchester United-ish transfer window here. I mean, some people look at this and think that it's gone well because they brought in a player like Sesko when they were rumored to get Liam Delap, Brian Mbuemo, Matheus Cunha. These are really solid players, obviously. But other than them, what have they done really? They really desperately needed a goalkeeper, and then they bring in like a 21-year-old from Royal Antwerp. Is that going to be cutting it as a first team keeper? Probably not. Moving on, a lot of older players, but this isn't just good enough. And remember what I said, we have to judge them by the size of the club and their budget, and that makes Manchester United the worst Premier League team in terms of transfers this transfer window. Up next, we have a club that's been rejected more times than me in a nightclub. It's Newcastle, who obviously had Alexander Isaac stealing the headlines the entire summer, going on strike, and signing on deadline day for Liverpool for a record breaking fee for the Premier League. Obviously, a good sale in terms of money, but a big loss that they don't really seem to have replaced that well, in my opinion. Of course, we can't judge them too quickly. Wissa and Voltemade are two good players. I think they overspent heavily on both of them, though, so the value there isn't great. But Jacob Ramsey and Anthony Elanga are two exciting transfers. All in all, I think it's pretty good from Newcastle, and I'm going to put them into decent. Up next, we have a very low key side. This is Nottingham Forest, who sold Ante Lange for a big chunk of cash there and brought in players like Douglas Luiz, obviously on loan, but still are very good players. Dan Ndoye, who's had a brilliant start. Mar Hutchinson. I mean, this is pretty exciting. Not that many big names, but a few really good signings that I think can go a bit under the radar. And I'm going to put Nottingham Forest into mid. I mean, wow, look at this. This is really impressive. Sunderland Football Club. If you look at the names of these players coming in and you didn't know the club, I would say that this was probably like a top 7, top 8 club, maybe. I mean, Sunderland are newly promoted and haven't been in the Premier League for a few years now. Bringing in players like Adingra, Robbie, Xhaka, Mukiele. This is so impressive. I mean, Sunderland might actually do enough to stay up this year if this works out. I'm gonna go ahead and put them into really good. Up next, we have the reigning Europa League champions. This is Tottenham Hotspur, and they have managed to do a few really nice signings here. I mean, Xavi Simons, who expected that? That's very impressive from Tottenham. Mohamed Kudus, another exciting attacker. They've gone quite attack heavy with Tell and Moani here, but Palinha, even though he's on loan, is a top class Premier League midfielder who's very physical. Quite impressive from Tottenham, if I'm gonna have to be honest. Will it work out? It is Spurs, so probably not. But based on the transfer window alone, I'm gonna put them into decent. Next up is another London club, and this is West Ham, one of the worst teams this transfer window, in my opinion at least. Sure, they moved on some of their aging players, but the signings, I mean, what is this? They brought in some decent money for Kudus, but they haven't managed to spend it that well at all, in my opinion. And I'm beginning to question if this is going to be enough to even keep them up in the Premier League, going off how competitive it's going to be. I'm going to put West Ham's transfer window in the real bad category. And lastly, we have another side that might well go down this season. It's Wolves, who have had a good signing of Jorgen Strand Larsen, who was haunted by Newcastle at the end of the window, but they managed to keep him, and it's of course a very, very good players. Some good sales and some good signings, judging by the size of the club. But is this going to be enough to keep him up? I'm just not sure. I would have liked to see a bit more activity. Also, going by the fact that they have had a few good sales here, I'm going to put Wolves into poor. So, this right here is the finished tier list, crowning Liverpool Football Club as the winners of this summer's transfer window. Let me know below in the comments what you guys would have done differently, and thank you guys for watching.